So hello and welcome to another episode of the Journo Links podcast, or welcome back if you've been here before. To get everyone up to speed, this podcast is for journalists, bloggers, and podcasters, or anyone similar to tell their own stories. My name is Conor O'Brien, and I'm a journalist. I run Courageous Nerd, entertainment and pop culture platform which features interviews with all sorts of actors, writers, and filmmakers. Joining me today is the fantastic Adam Walton. Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Connor. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well, thank you, and thank you for coming on. Really great to have you on this.
Absolute pleasure. I can't wait to do it.
Yeah, and just to kind of give anyone listening or watching a bit of a heads up, so like some of the other guests, we met doing the NCTJ diploma course. But I guess before we kind of get into like how we've got to know each other and like and your kind of like background, so to speak, like could you maybe just give a brief snapshot into who you are, just kind of give people who aren't familiar like a bit of an insight into what Adam's all about?
Kind of an existential question. Who am I?
Uh, uh,
No, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm 23 years old. I'm from South Africa. Moved over here to London, where I sit as we speak. Must be about 10 months ago, something like that.
mm,
Primarily to hopefully become a journalist. That was the inclination. My primary focus is on sports journalism or culture journalism. That's the kind of stuff I'm interested in, which I'm sure we will get into. But yeah, that's me kind of sort of briefly in a nutshell, my three features of me, I guess.
mm. Absolutely, yeah. And obviously, as I mentioned, we met doing this course, and I suppose what was it about the course that we did in particular that made you want to do that one as opposed to in a course maybe back home in South Africa or even elsewhere in the UK?
Well, the big draw card in terms of other places in the UK was I wanted to be in London.
Mm,
I think what a lot of people, maybe a lot of people do understand this, but I think what a lot of people in London don't understand is that everywhere else in the world, London is one of those magical places, bright lights, big city. And the allure of the place is definitely very present in a lot of people's mind. In terms of why I wanted to do that course, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, my primary love, or my first love, maybe is a better way to say it, for
mm,
journalism, sports journalism, and football. Football is one of the things that I think about pretty much, I'd say 50% of my life.
mm.
Um, and the golden goose of the Premier League is based in the UK and is based in London
Yeah.
primarily. The center of it is, and I'm sort of chasing that golden goose and seeing if I can pick up a few eggs that it may
Mm,
drop along the way. And yeah, the journalism in South Africa is interesting. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it because I didn't spend that much time in it, so I didn't want
yeah.
to speak out of turn. But what excited me is the opportunity to get involved in a whole lot of different stuff in London. The idea of opportunity and the idea of rising in the industry where everything is so, I guess, so primary. And in terms of why I wanted to do that course, it was just an opportunity. I looked at a few options, and it fit the dates that I needed to do it in, and I was relatively convinced by what they put forward, and I could afford it, and
Yeah.
I did it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's sometimes the answer is
Mm.
strangely practical. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then I suppose because a lot of people on the course, including myself, like it wasn't like a straight path to journalism. We had like other interests or other careers. Like, how about you? Like, did you like was that something you thought about for a long time, or did you just kind of happen on it? I know, for instance, Will, who's a good friend of both of ours, kind of. I think it sounds like a bit of a whim almost for him, kind of how he ended up there. But I suppose like how was it for you?
I was thinking about this just in the build up to the interview. So actually, it was quite a nice little trip down memory lane. Um, my interest in journalism, I think, is kind of retroactive,
Mm,
or retroactively fitted might be a better way of putting it.
yeah.
Um, I wouldn't say I was 6 years old, thumbing through newspapers,
Mm,
memorizing, policy decisions and stuff like that. That wasn't me. I think like a lot of people our age, a lot of our career stories and maybe even our life stories sort of start around the pandemic. It's a big
mm,
shift for
yeah.
a lot of people, right? Um, I was no different. I think a lot of people had things that brought them a lot of comfort in the pandemic. And one of them for me was football podcasts. I'd always listened to them, or I'd sort of discovered them when I was sort of like 17 and had built up a little bit of a listening. But then as soon as the pandemic hit, I mean, I was listening to, it must have been about 40 hours a week or something. I mean, it was a big part of, just getting through, and I became incredibly interested. And what was great about that time is that, especially when there wasn't football, these football podcasts became quite interesting and inventive, and they were interesting conceptual episodes or historical episodes, or lots of interesting stuff. And I became very, 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 very interested in that sort of format. And at the same time, I became quite uninterested in the degree that I was doing at the time.
Right.
I was doing a law degree for my sins. And I gradually realized, as all the fun and the intrigue of actual campus life got stripped away, I found it really boring. Really boring reading case law and mass policy documents. It's just, policy, obviously, whatever. But it was just not for me. And quite fortuitously, I was meant to be doing a practical film course that year. And due to scheduling and everything being online, it essentially got cancelled. So I pivoted to a writing course, a journalism and media studies course. South African media landscape was half of it, very interesting. And then actual practical writing. And one of the tasks that we got was write a feature-length piece on anything we wanted to, sort of with vague ideas of being investigative, but not really. And it was the pandemic. Wasn't much investigating we could do. And I decided to do it. At that time was the sort of the beginnings of the Newcastle takeover by the Saudi government, and Khashoggi and that whole debacle, which is still, literally yesterday, the Live Golf Tour merged with the PGA. It is still a story that is developing. And I decided to write it on that. And the brief was about 1,000 words. I think I wrote about like 4,500. Which is not a thing, which is not good. That was not good writing. And if I read it now, I think it would be absolute drivel. But what I was realizing is the reason I wrote so much is because I didn't want to stop doing it. It was the first time I'd had fun in an academic environment in months, if not years, if ever. And I thought that was a pretty clear indication that, I'm really finding this one thing really boring, but this thing that I've stumbled on, I find interesting. And I've always had a bit of a passion, and I think maybe a small knack, a minute amount of talent for writing. So I figured, hey, that's a pretty good sign. And it was sort of planted the seed. And I think about a year and a half, 2 years later, I was in London sitting with you in that classroom, starting my journalism course. So yeah, the just to round it off, the passion for writing sort of came after that. It was born out of other mediums and other passions, and then sort of fitted that on to make it fit into whatever skill sets I may have.
Oh, brilliant. And obviously, again, like as we mentioned, we met on this course, started last September, so a few months ago now. But I've asked the other people from the course who've been on this podcast, but I suppose to ask about first impressions of like back when we first met. Do you remember specifically the first time you met me, or maybe I guess I could go first and talk about the first conversation I remember us having and see whether your memory matches up.
We've spoken about this, I think we spoke about it a few days, didn't we? Where the first conversation that I remember having with you, I think, was actually on my birthday.
Yeah. Well,
so I guess we can put the exact day. The 9th of September, which is my birthday, obviously, 9th of the 9th, 1999, don't you know? And I was interested, my one passion in life is football, my other passion in life is film. And I know that's something you're incredibly interested in television. And I had heard, I think it was mentioned in the course, that you had Courageous Nerd and that you were doing all these interviews. I was like, this is a guy I need to corner somewhere and get to talking to. And so I think we were standing at the bar once, and it was my birthday, and we grabbed a drink, and I chatted to you a little bit about that, and we're friends ever since.
Absolutely. But actually, I think it was the same day, but just a bit earlier when you were talking about like cornering. I remember like during like a break between sessions at the course. I think it was like I said earlier that day. but like, and it's the first time I think I'd spoken to either of you, but you, me, and Amrit had a random like conversation, and you were like, "Oh, you're the guy who does the interviews, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And then and then I think later on that we had that discussion at the pub. But yeah, no, I mean, the first one I remember is that this like throwaway random conversation, just literally in a couple of minutes. But yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting, isn't it? Particularly at the start of I did another course, short film course, just before I did the journalism course, just as a bit
Yeah.
of fun. And it's always interesting going into new environments and those initial friendships that you make, and the people that you first start talking to are the people that you know, they never end up really being the people that you end up spending a lot of time with. And then
Yeah.
I mean, we'd been, when we first spoke, we'd been on the course for about a week and hadn't crossed paths, and
Yeah.
you know, and yet you spend, you know, the first few days with certain people, and always interesting how you eventually find your crowd. I think it's very, yeah. But that was, so my first impression of me was, of you, I guess, and I guess of the courses, I know a lot of people is interesting people and a lot of like-minded people. I think that's what,
Yeah.
of course, you know, there's obviously also, there's variance, and there are lots of different people and different perspectives from different backgrounds. But yeah, it was just a lot of interesting people that you want to sit down and really get to know, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was talking a couple of episodes ago to our friend Joe, who was also on the course with us, and I don't know whether it came up in the actual recording or if it was like off camera, so to speak. But Joe mentioned that kind of a reason why he was really interested in doing the course was to build up potential connections. Obviously, looking ahead into doing this as a career, you know, that's like 25 people ish in the same industry. So like, was that something you thought about? Were you kind of more in the moment, like I'm here now, and that's more like a future thought?
Listen, I think he, how would I say this? I think that Joe is absolutely right to think like that. I think for me, maybe my networking was a bit more big picture, not in terms of like career, but in terms of I didn't know anyone in London.
Right, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know any. I mean, I had, I think, one cousin that was floating around somewhere, and this was sort of me. There were a lot of things that this course did, or I wanted to do rather, and that was, you know, improve my journalism and sort of get a toe into the industry if I could, but also just to meet people. And where I'm from, Cape Town in South Africa, drink, he references where he's from, but it's quite a small, it's a big city, but it feels like a small place in terms of like a lot of people tend to know each other. And one of the reasons you end up moving country is because you want to meet new people and new interesting people. So that was kind of part of it. I won't lie, I remember walking into the course on the first day and seeing a whole bunch of people sort of wearing suits, all dressed up, you know, college.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, is this going to be a bunch of dreary pencil pushers? All they want to talk about is, I don't know, the latest
hard news kind
of.
of.
Hard news. I mean, hey, if that's your bag, that's your bag. But
yeah,
I remember that first day and being like, oh no, what's this going to be? And thankfully, wearing a suit or not, the majority of people were quite wonderful. So.
Yeah. No, I think we honestly did have like a really, really good group. I mean, there's not one person I can say, or like they were the one that we all hated. It was like, you know, like everyone, you know.
We can, but we'll say it off camera.
Yeah. Will, love you, Will. Yeah, no, I suppose obviously kind of looking after the course, or actually I'm not sure of the exact timeline of this, but I know you've got a blog that you started and it's called Bald Men of the 90s, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, so I suppose, like, could you tell me a bit about that and how that came to be?
Yeah, it's a little small thing that I'm doing, I guess. Around Christmas time during the course, we had like a little week break, right? And it was hard work, that course. I think everyone was quite exhausted. And
yeah.
A little bit, and as much as it was valuable, it could occasionally be, and I don't think this is unfair to say, I think it could occasionally be quite disheartening. Because it was a competitive environment to a certain extent. But it was also, I mean, everyone was very supportive, but it was, you know, and critical, and you have to improve, and you have to take criticism to improve, and also the type of journalism that it was by and large, you know, hard news style journalism.
Yeah.
Which is good and interesting and something that I would like to do more of. but also not necessarily my first love. And I was sort of thinking over this Christmas period, I was like, I want to do something a little bit more, maybe creative and a little bit fun, and something that explores the type of writing that I really love. I love writing like by David Sedaris, by Bryson, you know, interesting, you know, column-y type writing. And I sort of just figured, let me start writing, but I needed a conceit, I needed a hook. And I mean, the worst thing I think in the world is to be self-important and to think your opinions are worth more than they are, because, you know, everyone's got one. So I sort of came up with a rough, vague idea that I wanted to write about stuff that doesn't matter. I've mentioned both of these before. I mean, the two primary passions in my life are film and football. And then the third, I guess you could say, a strong minor would be music. Strong minor, but maybe mine's coal. But little joke. But and so I sort of just thought I'd write sort of shortish 1,000-word pieces on things that don't really matter, but that I take quite seriously, having a little bit of fun with them. That's the idea. And the name, which I know is maybe slightly strange, came about because I guess the germination of this idea came from the fact that I was thinking one day about how there aren't many famous bald people anymore, or rather that there are some famous bald people, but they became famous in the 90s, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I mean, you can reel them off. I mean, Bruce Willis rose to fame in 1999, let's call it the 90s. Stanley Tucci, Mark Strong, Larry David,
yeah,
who played George Costanza, whose name I've completely forgotten.
Jason Alexander.
Jason Alexander, good knowledge.
Yeah.
Oh, what a man. I saw him in a movie the other day. Anyway, I was surprised to see him. I was like, what's George doing in this movie? Totally besides the point. And I sort of thought, oh, this is the kind of thing that I would love to read. And so I thought, well, if I'd love to read it, maybe I should write about it.
Well,
yeah, is to write silly little, I like to call them literary holidays. Not really much to think about, but just a nice thing to
like a respite kind of thing, just kind of like, enjoy it. No, and actually that really resonates with me, because the reason why I started this podcast was that I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if back when I was like first thinking about it, if there had been a podcast like XYZ, and I'm like, well, why don't I just do it then? I mean, obviously it's too late for me to, I guess, appreciate it, for the original idea I'm thinking of, but like maybe pay it forward and maybe hopefully help other people, or even journalists who are already in might kind of appreciate hearing other people's stories. And so again, I kind of missed the boat for me, but why didn't I just do it? I've got experience in interviewing, and here we are.
Exactly. Well, I think that's I guess this is a bit slightly bigger picture, but I guess there's two ways to approach journalism, or trying how to get into journalism. There's finding a job and creating a job, right? I guess maybe that's for any industry. And both are totally viable, and you can even do both at the same time. But I think what's always more exciting to me is that if you're creating yourself for your job, what you end up creating is something that you're actually interested in, or something that you maybe a little bit more proud of, or a different kind of pride. Maybe that's better to say. And yeah, I think it's exciting. Yeah, that's like you say, if you wake up one day and be like, I really wish this existed. There's nothing, it's amazing. It's great if you could then go make it. Whether it ends up being any good or not, I don't know. I'm not going to say what I did. I think this is a great idea, and I think you're excellent at it. But it's exciting, and it's also quite fulfilling, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose just for anyone, again, watching or listening, who might either like be on an NCTJ course, or might be doing the one that we did, I suppose maybe could you talk about kind of where you are after it, and kind of what you hope to do, just to kind of give people a full picture.
Yeah, well, I know that I don't know when this will be going out, but I know that you've done one interview with Joe Bambridge, which has gone out, who's working for Politico now.
Yeah.
And then you've done one with Ruben Rosso Powell, who's doing really cool stuff with PA Sports.
Yeah.
Shout out to Ruben, doing really cool work. I was sort of thinking about this, so I haven't got necessarily a permanent job out of this. I'm maybe the not a cautionary tale, but maybe a dash of realism that you can throw in.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm saying is that I guess maybe having moved to this country, I don't have as much of a network and as much of a basis to go off. So I'm sort of really finding my feet. So I haven't really gotten a job straight away out of it. I'm working part-time in a pub, which is lovely. And then just sort of working on writing as much as possible. And that's kind of where I'm at. It's to be brutally honest, it's a difficult industry to get into. It's the jobs that are interesting and fulfilling are snapped up like that, and if anything, people are holding on to them as much as possible. As we all know, funding for journalism is dying. The type of journalism that is being funded is, not necessarily that hard hitting or enjoyable. And yeah, that's this. I think I actually said this in a job interview the other day. Someone asked me a similar question. It's everyone always says get your foot in the door, and I totally agree. But it's also about getting your foot in the right door.
Yeah, that's true.
Door, you're going to go into a room which you don't want to be in. To really stretch the metaphor. So I guess that's what I'm trying to do. And if it's with sport, but otherwise, just keep on writing my blog and hopefully, consistently put out work and improve your writing. I believe that if you keep doing that, something will eventually happen.
Yeah, and exactly. And again, to your point, kind of having that sense of realism, because I said it to somebody in an earlier interview, it'd be very easy to just kind of get people who are in full-time positions to be like, oh, look at us, come, oh, isn't journalism lovely? Kind of, look at all this. But I think it's important to remember also that, it is an industry, it's competitive. And, to kind of give you that sense that, not everybody might get something right away after you finish, but obviously having done the course is a major help to you once you have that qualification. But just to kind of bear in mind, even if it doesn't happen straight away, if you kind of put yourself in the right direction, then hopefully it'll work out. But just to kind of again kind of give you that balanced view rather than just kind of give you all one direction, but no pun intended. But yeah.
And I think for me, and maybe not me in particular, but I sort of, as I said, actually right at the start of this interview, the idea of London is this golden goose. It's the land of opportunity, I like the big city, tide of London, tide of life, all of this stuff. And I do believe a lot of that is true. It's certainly a lovely, exciting place to live. But my idea was that there'd be more opportunity here than there would be in South Africa to do the type of stuff that I wanted to.
Sure, yeah.
Obviously, everyone in the UK, or a lot of people in the UK, and a lot of people in the world have the same thoughts. So they're also all coming here, and that's a lot of people that are converging on one place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's all about just keeping your head down and making sure that you're consistently putting yourself in the right position to take whatever opportunity. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But I guess, that is the honest answer, is that sometimes you just got to wait and work hard and hope something happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's a really, really interesting perspective that you bring to it as considering the position that you're in at the moment. I think it definitely provides a nice balance for at least the people who are watching or listening who aren't already journalists. I think you're a very helpful voice for them to hear. So
and it's a question of how much you want to do it, because there is an opportunity. There's quite a lot of probability that the journalism industry might not want you straight away, or might not want you in the thing that you want to. So it's a question of if you're going to do this. I mean, you look at Joe spoke about this in his interview, where he was saying he had a stable income and a job, and it was a risk for him, especially he's older than I am.
Right.
We are.
Most of us were, yeah.
Exactly.
He was the oldest male on the course. Yeah, it was,
And someone also like our mutual friend Eliza Park, who's working for Pulse now. She's also had a steady job, and a lot of people from that course had steady jobs. And sometimes you have to. It's a risk, and a lot of people. I mean, Eliza and Joe and other people on the course, obviously incredibly intelligent, and they're going to be amazing and are amazing. But yeah, I guess it's a question of being like, okay, if you're going to do this, you have to go all in. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. Absolutely, and I know we haven't got a lot of time left to work with, but I suppose to kind of round this off with a final question, and this is that might be the most meaningful to you, considering how far you've come. But obviously, if you look at yourself a year ago, what advice would you give to that Adam and where he is at that time?
That's a good question. What advice? I think the advice that I would give, and I would give this to, would just to be embrace not knowing. That sounds kind of airy fairy, but it's also true. I think a lot of people our age suffer from this, the fear of what's going to happen next. What do I do? And the idea of, I think there's a lot of pressure to always be moving forward and doing the next thing or progressing, whether that's in career or whatever it might be. And obviously you don't want to stand still, and obviously you don't want to become idle and off-like. But also, take the time to do things properly, and take the time to do things the way that you want to do as much as humanly possible. And that maybe means not knowing what your next step might be, or not knowing, what the next few months are going to look like. Just, things tend to work out if you're putting out the right work ethic and the right energy. And I'd say to that Adam from a year ago, hello. I would say, it's okay. Take a deep breath, and if sometimes it feels like you're standing still a little bit, then maybe you just need to stand still for a little bit, maybe need a rest. I'd also say shave more regularly. I look back at it, just buy a proper razor, chap. Get a haircut, come on. That's what I'd say.
Fantastic. Well, again, thanks again for coming on, Adam. Really great to speak with you. I mean, obviously we talk quite regularly, but it's really nice to kind of talk to you in this context. And I'm sure, you'll go on to do fantastic things, whether the timeline of that is. But just best of luck with everything, and hopefully see you in person soon.
Hopefully, yeah. Thanks a lot, Conor.
If you liked this episode of the Journo Links podcast, be sure to keep up with the pod on social media. On both Twitter and Instagram, it's at Journo Links Pod. Also, if you'd like to keep up with Courageous Nerd content, it's @_Courageous Nerd on Twitter and @Courageous Nerd on Instagram. Thank you, and see you in the next one.